So, where's the line? At what point does gathering information stop being journalism and start becoming espionage? It's a question with, quite literally, life or death stakes. And it forces us to figure out where we draw that line in the sand between two professions that are both chasing the truth, but for totally different reasons. You'd think the roles of a journalist and a spy are worlds apart, and they should be, but they often operate in the same dangerous places as aid workers or missionaries. And in the fog of global conflict, the lines between all of them can start to blur in some really, really dangerous ways. And for Terry Anderson, a journalist for the Associated Press, this wasn't some abstract debate. It was terrifyingly real. For the people who kidnapped him, it didn't matter if he was a journalist or a spy. The suspicion, just the mere possibility that he was working for the CIA, was enough to turn his life upside down. Anderson's whole ordeal kicked off because of one simple but absolutely devastating assumption. His captors were convinced that his job as a journalist was just a cover story. And what's crazy is that this assumption was based on a history that he had absolutely nothing to do with, but he was the one who had paid a price. Think about that. 6 years, from 1985 to 1991, that's more than 2,000 days, Terry Anderson was held hostage in Lebanon. And why? Because his captors were absolutely convinced that an American journalist working in a war zone just had to be a spy. So where in the world did they get that idea? I mean, really, why would a militant group in Lebanon look at an AP bureau chief and see a CIA agent? Well, to get the answer to that, we've got to rewind the clock about a decade before he was even captured, to a time when America's intelligence agencies had a major reckoning. The mid-1970s, this period actually became known as the Year of Intelligence. A whole series of bombshell revelations basically forced the American public to look at what its spy agencies had been up to, in the shadows, both at home and across the globe. And wow, did things move fast. It all started in 1974 with some incredible investigative reporting, which then snowballed into a full-blown Senate investigation. It was called the Church Committee, and its job was pretty straightforward: pull back the curtain on decades of secret government operations. And one of the most shocking things they found was a program called Operation Mockingbird. And here's the kicker. It turns out the suspicion that got Terry Anderson captured wasn't just paranoia. The Church Committee confirmed it. The CIA had, in fact, secretly used American journalists to gather intelligence. The assumption wasn't baseless at all. It was a historical fact. And it wasn't just about journalists. The committee uncovered a breathtaking list of abuses: secret plots to assassinate foreign leaders, mind control experiments on unsuspecting American citizens, illegal spying on everyone from Martin Luther King Jr. to anti-war protesters. This created this deep, deep distrust of the agency, a legacy that set the stage for the debate that was to come. Okay, so after all this came out, the CIA created some internal rules that for the most part banned using journalists and clergy as assets. But there was a loophole. An exception could be made. And in 1996, this all came to a head when the Senate held a hearing to debate one thing: should that exception even exist? And this hearing, it brought everyone to the table. We're talking the director of the CIA, famous journalists like Ted Koppel, Terry Anderson himself, and leaders from major religious groups. The question before them was simple, but the answer was anything but. Should there ever be a situation where a spy agency can use a journalist or a missionary? The two sides were crystal clear. On one side, you had the CIA director, John Dutch. He argued for flexibility. For those ticking bomb scenarios where maybe a journalist has that one piece of information that could save lives. But on the other side, journalists and clergy said, no way. They argue that even the possibility of them cooperating with the CIA puts a target on the back of every reporter and every aid worker out there. Mortimer Zuckerman, who was the editor of U.S. News and World Report, he put it perfectly. He basically said, look, a free press is a national treasure, and its greatest service to the country is being completely independent from the government. The moment that's gone, its value is totally destroyed. And this wasn't just a fear for journalists. Religious groups felt the exact same way. Sister Claudette Laverdiere, who'd spent over 20 years as a missionary in Africa, she explained that their work is built 100% on trust. Any hint that they're secretly gathering info for a foreign government doesn't just put them in danger, it endangers the very communities they're there to help. So, this all brings us back to that really tough question. Where do you draw the line?
Is national security so important that it's okay to blur these professional roles? This is so much bigger than a debate about spies. It gets to the heart of a core democratic principle. This is really the classic dilemma, right? In any healthy democracy, you need transparency, you need an informed public that gets its news from an independent press, but at the same exact time, every government on Earth says it needs to keep some secrets to stay safe. So how do you balance those two things when they're pulling in opposite directions? Now, the main tool that we as citizens and journalists have to demand that transparency is the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA. It's actually a really powerful law. It means any of us can request records from federal agencies. You just figure out who has the documents, describe what you need, and send in the request. It's supposed to be the bedrock of government accountability.
But, and this is a huge but, FOIA has its limits. Big ones. Things like national security, classified information, ongoing investigations, all that stuff stays in the shadows, totally hidden from public view. And that creates this huge gray area where these impossible debates are forced to happen. So we're left with this. When you look at these stories, you have to weigh the costs. What is the real price of secrecy? Is it a loss of trust? Is it the credibility of our press? Or, as Terry Anderson's story shows us, is it sometimes paid with years of a person's life? It's a question with no easy answer.